Hi, I'm back. Sorry for the long hiatus, but I'm back and I would like to welcome all of you to Naturally Nerdy Naya. I'm Naya, your gracious host, and I am going to be doing something new. I am going to be starting a new video series as your hair advocate. And this is going to be an educational series because I think there's a lot of people already out there that are creating videos for hair products and how to do certain techniques with your hair. And so I feel like this may be another thing that you could add to your little collection as far as educating yourself on your hair, things you should know that can help you in your journey, because those sort of things definitely are highly beneficial, and you can't get very far without knowing at least some things about your hair. So this video series, video 1, is going to be on protein. We hear a lot about protein, and sometimes the information that we get is more confusing than others. We can read articles, we can Google, we can watch YouTube videos, and I feel like knowing about protein is very important. And like I said, this is video 1, so we're going to cover a lot more things, things that you may not know about, or things that you do know about. And protein just may be one of those things that you do know about, but you may learn something that you did not know before. So stick with me. You're going to love this series. I'm really excited. I've done my research. I've probably spent more time reading about certain things than I care to read about. But I've actually learned some things that I didn't know. So that's why I said, stick with me. You never know, knowledge is power. And, as I say, when you know better, you do better, right? Okay, let's get started. So I got some notes to help me out a little bit. All right, so why does your hair need protein? Let's start with the basics. Why does your hair need protein? Think you know the answer to that? Let's have a little nerdy moment here. All right, so your hair is pretty much held together by bonds. Protein reinforces those bonds that your hair desperately needs. Okay, got that? So in other words, protein reduces your hair from breakage because it's reinforcing those bonds that your hair needs to kind of keep your hair together. Think of protein as little muscle men. They're buff, they're numerous, and they link together. They're linked together, these strong muscled men inside your hair shaft. So these muscle men sometimes can fall out of your hair, or you lose your hair, or they become weakened, or they're destroyed. And you need to get more little muscle men to come in and, march their way back into your hair. So think of protein as little muscle men, okay? So let's keep that analogy. When those little muscle men come in and they link arms and they're, creating strength within your hair, that helps moisture, think of moisture as little soft pillows, little pillow people, to come in and, get all roomy and they come into your hair strand, and those muscle men are like their protectors. They're like, okay, hey, little pillow man, you stay right here. We got you. You know what I'm saying? And it keeps little pillow men from falling out. Okay. Got that. Stick with me. So that's why your hair needs protein. All right, hopefully I have not lost you, but just know that protein is very, very important. It's not the most important thing, but it is one of the most important things in regards to your hair care. All right. So now let's talk about what are the different types of protein. There are a lot of different types of protein, and hair protein is going to, of course, be different than, say protein that your body uses. Your body is pretty much made up of thousands of protein molecules. Some are meant for muscles, some are meant for hair, some are meant for, skin, hair, muscle, bones. Protein is pretty much utilized everywhere in your body. But in regards to just hair protein, there are lots of hair proteins. And when we're talking about actual ingredients, it gets even more numerous. So I'm going to list here the many different types of proteins. But just know that there's different types of proteins, and some are smaller molecules than others. Some are bigger molecules, and some of them are considered a mild protein. Some are considered a very intense protein. There's many different types of protein. So as you kind of view the list there, you may recognize some of the protein that you see listed here, and some of them you may not even realize was an actual protein. And so some of the light proteins that you typically would see are those with the bigger molecules, things like that. And I'll also list what's considered a light protein as well for you to view. Now, you may need protein for more serious damage. Say, for instance, you colored your hair, or you got a dye job, or you've been like straightening your hair quite a bit using a lot of direct heat, like from a flat iron. Those sort of things can actually weaken the protein in your hair, or you can lose some protein in your hair. So like I said, think of those little strong men. They get weakened, or you may lose some. And so in that case, you may need a more intensive protein treatment. And those type of proteins are typically meant to reverse some of the damage that you've done to your hair. When you're using a more intense protein, you would use those typically every 6 to 8 weeks. There's even some that are even more intensive that you would use maybe every so often, maybe like every 3 months or every 6 months, kind of depending on your type of hair. So know that there's different degrees and there's different levels of protein. There's not a one size fit all. And usually when you are purchasing products or when you're searching for products, I will talk to you here just a little bit about what to look for, so that way you know what's intensive, what's mild, what's a light protein. So that way you don't get too confused, because it can be very confusing. And this is just kind of more of a intro course into protein. In the description, I will link some articles where you can read a lot more about protein. That way you can have some of your answers, some of your questions answered, because like I said, it's a lot of information and I don't want to overwhelm you. So we're just going to talk about, like I said, some basics, but just know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay. So like I said, some of the proteins have smaller molecules where they can penetrate the hair a lot easier. So you may notice those types of proteins are called keratin treatments, or let's see, silk, amino acids, things like that. Like I said, those are really good in regards to intensive, really damaging, repairing type proteins. And like I said, listed here, you'll see some of the proteins that I'm talking about. And once you start to get into the habit of really like understanding ingredients and things like that in your products, then you can start to identify very easily, okay, this is a product that has protein in it. All right. So that's it for as far as what types of protein, or the types of proteins that you would see in your hair products. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight about what to look out for. Okay. All right. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how protein affects your hair. Now, this is when it may get a little confusing, so I'm gonna try to explain this in a way where I don't come off contradicting, okay? So I'll try to explain what that means, and I'll try to just, like I said, I wanna make this simple and easy for you, because it can really get confusing. It can get really contradicting as far as the signs and the symptoms. So let's get started, okay? We're gonna talk about what happens when your hair has too much protein, okay? Because it can happen. You can actually overdo it on the protein because we hear it all the time. You know, your hair needs protein, your hair needs protein, and we're giving our hair protein when it doesn't really need it. So let's talk about what that looks like, okay? Now, you may notice that your hair becomes drier than usual, may even break off a lot easier than it usually does, and so usually that's following a protein treatment. So usually if you've done a protein treatment pretty recently and you notice your hair feels drier and that it's breaking off more than likely you have overdone it on the protein, or the protein that you use is too strong for your hair. Your hair can also feel like straw, like I said, really dry, doesn't feel quite right. The hair shaft feels a little bit more ruffled, not as smooth as it should. And so you'll notice pretty easily that your hair doesn't feel quite the same, and that it doesn't feel soft and hydrated and moisturized like it usually does. Your hair will dry out a lot quicker, and also you'll notice that you will typically get more knots. It'll get a little bit more tangled. Like I said, that's due to your hair being drier and a little bit more brittle. And so what will happen is your hair will just kind of get tangled up and it'll knot really easily. And because of those knots, you'll see more breakage. All right, so when we're using too much protein, we call that protein overload. All right, and so we'll talk a little bit later about what you can do to get your hair back on track and reverse some of that protein overload that you did. But protein overload is pretty obvious. Like I said, usually you can tell when your hair is just, oh man, I did something off or wrong and it's just not quite right. So that's what happens when you are using too much protein. So let's talk about when your hair actually needs protein. Okay, so if you are not using enough protein or you need a protein treatment, your hair will start to feel kind of mushy. I don't think I've ever experienced this. Some people may have, but I don't technically know what that feels like. But from what I've read, it describes it as you not being able to feel your individual strands, and instead you'll feel it like kind of like a wet t-shirt. So that's one sign. Your hair also can break as well. I've seen some hair strand tests where they will take a strand of hair and they'll pull it. And if your hair stretches and stretches and stretches and stretches and stretches and then finally breaks, more than likely you need a protein treatment because you have way too much moisture going on. Or if you've been using a lot of deep conditioners without protein in it, you've been doing a lot of moisturizing and your hair is still dry or it's still breaking, it's probably because you need a protein treatment. So usually the key is if you're using enough moisture and your hair still is having some problems, then you might want to try some protein and see if that helps things out. When you don't have enough of those muscle men, those little soft pillows that are your moisture will easily fall out. So your hair will quickly become drier, even after you put moisture in, because you don't have those protein reinforcing those bonds to keep that moisture in, if that makes sense. So that's usually a good indicator that that may be what's going on. And like I said, when you are applying heat to your hair, if you're coloring your hair, more than likely you will need some protein because like I said, you've damaged those protein bonds. So you need to put some protein back in there. All right, so hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you're following still. Hopefully you're still with me. And if you are, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, so let's talk about different types of hair and how they react to protein, because not all hair reacts the same to protein, believe it or not. Like I said, it's not a one size fit all. So once you've learned whether you're low porosity, high porosity, normal porosity, or medium porosity, your density, things like that, then you can really start to individualize your protein treatment plan for your hair. But for this segment, I'm going to touch on a little bit about how different porosities, how they behave when it comes to protein. So for low porosity, the hair behaves a little differently when it comes to protein. You won't need it as much because your hair is low porosity. It's actually very healthy, and you don't necessarily need protein to repair any porosity damage. So more than likely you're using protein to kind of retain moisture a little bit, and so you won't need very frequent protein treatments. You may actually have a protein sensitivity, which means that your hair is very selective about the type of protein, the amount of protein, how often you're doing your protein treatment. So that's can get kind of tricky. Think about, like I said, the little strong men. You already got a lot of strong men in your hair if you're low porosity, but every now and then you need a little bit more, or you need to strengthen some of those strong men. So you're gonna probably use a milder protein, and then, like I said, refer to that list that I showed you, or you're just going to need protein every so often, not very much, and your application is going to be a little different. So we'll talk about that here at the video with the tips on protein usage. But just know for low porosity, you may not need it as often, and you may be very sensitive to certain proteins. A lot of people don't like coconut oil. that can mimic protein. So you may notice that you just do not do well with protein or with coconut oil. That does not mean that you don't need protein at all. Do not, if you ever hear that, that is not true. You just may not need protein as often. You may not need a higher concentration of protein, or you may just need a different type of molecule, either a smaller or a bigger molecule, depending on your hair density. Like I said, I'll link a really good article that talks about that. But it can really get down to a huge science, because we're not trying to be Bill Nye, more like Sid the Science Kid, because I'm not a licensed cosmetologist. And so, like I said, I'm just basing off of research on people who do have some sort of degree or license, or, who are experts in these sort of things. So like I said, I'll link some of those articles below. For high porosity, either you are using a more intense protein treatment fairly occasionally, like every month or so, or you're using a mild protein treatment more frequently, like every other wash day or every week, something like that. Once again, just understand that your density could also affect how the protein behaves in your hair. But for high porosity, you're going to use the protein treatment more so to treat your porosity levels. So you want to use the protein to get your porosity lowered, and so that's a good way to do so. Sometimes people have high porosity hair because they've chemically treated it, they've done a hair dye, or they're using extreme heat, and that can raise your hair porosity. So once again, if you're doing those sort of things on your hair, make sure you're using some protein to repair what was lost. Because you remember what I said about the strong men, if you don't have enough, of those guys kind of hold it in, those soft pillows, then they're going to easily come out. And you're going to notice right after you've washed your conditioner out, it felt good going in, but as soon as you wash it out, your hair is dry like a Brillo pad. It's because you need some sort of protein to maintain that moisture. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about what kind of products you find protein in. And this is where I was floored. When I tell you, I was absolutely surprised by how much protein was in my hair products. And then I realized that I was actually creating protein overload in my own hair, because I would notice that my hair started to get a lot of knots, possibly more shedding than usual, and it would feel good once I used it, but then it really wouldn't retain the moisture. So like I said, it can mimic, protein overload can kind of mimic not having enough protein. But I pay attention to how tangly my hair gets. Oh my goodness, it was bad. And so that's when I realized I may be using too many products with protein in it. And then when I looked at my products, yeah, that kind of solidified my suspicion. So I'm gonna tell you what I found in my list of products that had protein in it. I had no idea. Some of them I did, and some of them I had no idea. So let's take a look at what I found. Now, there's times when I actually want to do a protein treatment. There's times I'm like, okay, I need a protein treatment. But there's times I want just some moisture. When you think of a leave-in, I never considered protein being in my leave-in because it's meant to moisturize. But then I didn't realize that protein technically can aid in moisturization. So that's why they add protein to some of these leave-ins, because it can, like I said, create those little strong men to hold those little pillows in place. But when you don't need any more protein, it can have the opposite effect, okay? All right, so starting out with shampoos. Now, I have a shampoo with a protein in it, but I could not remember which one it was, and I couldn't find it. But be on the lookout. There are shampoos out there that has protein in it. There probably are not that many, but keep an eye out for things like that. Sometimes they may be listed as detanglers, moisturizing shampoos. Like I said, protein technically can be a moisturizer, so sometimes they add those proteins in there just to aid in your moisturization. So look at the ingredients. Just because it's a shampoo don't mean that they don't put protein in it, because trust me, they do. All right, let's start with, next we'll do conditioners, okay? Now, I have a lot of deep conditioners or masks that has protein in them, and And when I first started my hair care journey, you know, I was trying to repair some of that damage that I created when I was doing a lot of straightening. I transitioned. I didn't do a big chop. I transitioned, and then I eventually cut off the relaxed ends. So I did a medium chop, if that exists. All right, this is actually one of my favorite deep conditioners, and I can't remember if I've ever showed this in a video or not. I've only got a couple of hair, or 3 hair videos. But this is the Deep Treatment Mask by Texture ID. Is sweet almond oil, wheat protein, and honey. Restores strength and hydration. This is probably my most mild protein conditioner, to the point where you really don't feel a whole lot of effects of the protein, but it's probably just enough in there to, like I said, aid in that hydration. But it has, let's see, it has hydrolyzed wheat protein as the second, actually, as the last ingredient. So that's how you know it's not a really strong protein, but it does have some in it. But notice how it makes it seem like it's a huge like protein treatment, but it's really not. But this is really good. I really like this, and I always forget about it because I have so many other so many other deep conditioners. I forget about this one, but this is a really good, because every time I use it, I'm like, oh, I love this deep conditioner, but you know, it's not the one that I immediately reach out for, but this is definitely a good backup. This one I just picked up recently, and I just used it actually for this wash and go, and so far I'm liking the results. So far my hair is soft. It is absolutely shiny. Look at this. Look how shiny my hair is. And so this is the Uncle Funky's Daughter Heal and Renew Intensive Hair Mask for naturally chemically treated or heat styled hair. I feel it's kind of mild and probably low porosity approved because once again, it is fairly low on the ingredient list here, and there's so many good moisturizing ingredients in the beginning that it really counteracts the effect of harshness of the protein. So yes, this has silk amino acids, which is a smaller molecule acid, or a smaller molecule protein, but it is close to not even the middle of the ingredients. It's probably the beginning of the bottom of ingredients. So once again, I feel like this is one of those protein treatments that you can use like regularly and then not like have too much of an ill effect on your hair if your hair is more protein sensitive, or you don't really need an intensive protein treatment. I had straightened my hair, or blow dried it straight, and I did my little braids, which I'll show you a picture of here, how it came out. It came out really cute. It didn't last as long as I wanted to because I bought really cheap hair. So next time I'm gonna have to really invest in my hair. But I use this afterwards just to kind of repair a little bit of protein, because I did blow dry my hair straight. So I didn't need a huge intense protein treatment. But I did want a little bit of protein, so I used this. So I just picked that up from Target, I believe, and I really like it. It smells really good. This is another, this is a deep conditioner that I was actually surprised had protein in it. I did not know, because, sorry, I'm shaking there a little bit, because it is a Honey Miracle hair mask. And it talks about how it's good for, you know, hydration. But when you listen to the description of what it's for, it is an intense, deep penetrating conditioner for dry, damaged, or color treated hair. Things that talk about damage, color treated, it's probably gonna have some protein in it, because remember, when you do those things to your hair, you need to replace it possibly with some protein. So I never really paid attention to the ingredients in this. And a lot of low porosity YouTubers, like, they rave about this conditioner. It is a really good conditioner. It's not as moisturizing as some of my other ones. I was actually surprised because it's so expensive, and I wasn't blown away, but I do like it. It has hydrolyzed wheat protein. And it has some silicones in it too, which I was not aware of. Like I said, I'm not going to reach for this too often just because of the silicones and because of the protein that's in it. Now, granted, the protein is towards the bottom a little bit. There's not a whole lot of ingredients in here, but okay, it's all right. I mean, I didn't pay full price for it, thank God. But yeah, this was one that I was really surprised that had protein in it. This is one, it's by Mielle, or Mielle. Rosemary Mint Strengthening Hair Mask. So when I read it, I'm thinking, oh, this is a protein treatment, or it's something to, to strengthen my hair. Once again, like I said, pay attention to how things are described and how things are listed. Because I want to say this is one of my conditioners that does not have protein in it, surprisingly, even though it's marketed as a strengthening. And the reason why I think it's marketed as a strengthening, because it has Panthenol in it. And Panthenol is more like a vitamin. And so like biotin, B5, I think it's, vitamin B5, those are considered vitamins, and so not necessarily proteins. And that may be something I touch in another video about different types of products that are meant for strengthening that are not necessarily proteins. But this one, I use this quite a bit. I really like it, but it is definitely not a protein treatment, even though it doesn't say it is. But based off of, by description, I'm thinking, oh, it's a protein treatment. And without, being smart about it and reading the ingredients, I didn't realize that there's absolutely no protein in this. As far as I know, there's no protein in it. I've looked over these ingredients and I have not been able to identify any of these as a protein. So if any of you do, please let me know, because I am unable to locate that. But it does have some great ingredients in this protein. So I'm not saying it's not a good one. It's just, I'm thinking it's going to strengthen my hair, and I don't know how biotin, what kind of effect that does have on my hair. It may have very little, it may have too much, who knows. All right, so next, and I'm just going to kind of zip through these because I don't want, to, ramble on forever about my my products. But another one that, and moving on to leave-ins, did not know that the melanin leave-in had protein in it. The protein it does have in it is, let's see if I can find hydrolyzed wheat protein. So hydrolyzed wheat protein is a very popular one, I'm noticing. And once again, it's not at the very beginning, so it's not a strong amount in there, but once again, it's still in here. So if you are trying to not do protein, be very careful about, like I said, your leave-ins. And there's also provitamin B5, which is another strengthening. Another surprising one that I'm so upset about. My Pattern. As you see my other videos, I love my Pattern leave-in conditioner so much. This actually has protein in it. Let's see, which protein was in this one? This also has biotin in it and Panthenol. Let's see. It has hydrolyzed vegetable protein. Now, vegetable protein is a larger molecule protein. It being hydrolyzed, I don't know if it makes it that much smaller or just a little bit smaller. It's definitely not as small as, say, the amino acids and the amino acids or the silk proteins, or maybe even the wheat protein. But the fact that it's a vegetable protein, and once again, it's in the middle of the list of ingredients. I love this leave-in conditioner. It doesn't have an effect on my hair like, say, this one does. And it may be because of what's paired with it. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I do know that I really like this leave-in a lot. And so, but what I do got to be careful about is using this too often, because even though it feels good going in, once my hair is dried and I've had my style for a few days, my hair gets totally knotted, especially in the back. And like I said, it may feel good at the time because, once again, protein is meant to really, strengthen and hold those little pillow moisturizers in. It'll feel good going in for a little bit, but then, like I said, if it's too much, then you'll start to see an adverse effect to it. Okay, so once again, be careful. Okay, so yeah, so my Pattern has protein in it, and like I said, I really like this. I like this this leave-in conditioner. So I don't know, I may have to pair this with another moisturizer just to make sure I'm creating some sort of balance. I don't know, but I just bought this and I'm gonna use it, darn it. Some other Pattern products that also had some protein in it, they're her gel. I have not used this yet. I don't know why I bought it. I'm surprised I haven't tried this yet, but this also has protein in it. I want to say it's hydrolyzed, I think I'm saying it right now, hydrolyzed wheat, which is different from the leave-in. So they probably use a much milder leave-in protein as opposed to the gel, possibly. And then the Stronghold, which I do use because I love it, because it's, you know, a really, really good hold if you want a slicked back look. It's snatched. Sorry, I'm such a nerd. But yeah, this also has a hydrolyzed vegetable protein. So another milder protein, but oh my God, if you were to use all three of these, you know, you might have a little bit of a effect there. Maybe, we'll see. You know, like I said, you gotta experiment. All right, what do we have next? This is one. So if anyone likes to use mousse, I bought this once again, just randomly. I'm an impulsive shopper, but I've actually used this a couple of times and I don't mind it. It a little bit goes a long way. So I'm trying not to make this into a product review. I can't help it, but if you like to use mousses, this also has protein in it. So be careful about protein in your products. And I would not think it would be in a mousse, but it is. Let's see, what kind of protein is in here? Hydrolyzed wheat protein, another popular protein. Hydrolyzed wheat protein, that's what's in it. So yeah, that has protein in it. Another Texture ID product. This is the Thermal Multi-Styling Foam. I have not used this yet. I do plan on doing a flexi rod at some point, and this is what I was going to use with it. So now I know there's some freaking protein in here, and it says it right there on the bottle. It says, if you can see it, it says wheat protein. So at least it tells you on the front. And if you're using this with heat styling, that's a good thing anyway, because like I said, you're using heat, you need some protein to protect your hair. So I mean, that makes sense, duh. But yeah, that also has it in here, and none of these ingredients has the protein as its first ingredient. So kind of like very similar to the mask, it's very, very low in the ingredient listing. Okay, so that's all my usual products that I was using that had protein in it. One that I actually purposefully use for protein is the Keratin 2-Minute Reconstructor, and I've talked about this in one of my videos. There is a 2-step one that is a much intensive protein treatment that I don't have on me. I do not use it very often, maybe once or twice a year, just depending on how I'm styling my hair. But that one is a protein treatment if you have some severe damage or you've been using heat a lot in your hair. That is a reconstructor. So anything that says reconstructor, intense protein or intense strengthening, more than likely it's going to have some pretty good protein in it. This has, and once again, it's not the very first ingredient. This has hydrolyzed vegetable protein. There's also hydrolyzed keratin a little further down. Let's see what else. And I think that's it. So those two proteins. There's another, okay, PG Pro. Okay, there's some other things in here, but yeah. So this is, I would consider this more of a mild, maybe not a light protein treatment, but definitely a mild protein treatment. I would not categorize this as an intensive or reconstructing protein treatment. I don't have any of those on me. I did have one by ID, but it was used. My daughter used it after she took her braids down, and and I can list that I'll list that as a recommended one if it does have that intense protein in it that we talked about. But that's why I don't really have any, because I rarely need something intensive like that. But yeah, so I don't have anything intensive or a reconstructor. Well, this is considered a reconstructor, but it's not intense at all. Now it may be a little bit more intense than most medium proteins because there's 2 in here, and keratin is considered a smaller molecular protein that really gets in that hair strand, and it fills it up, because some protein just it barely makes it into the hair strand, so that's why you may not see as much of effect as opposed to like keratin or silk amino acids, hydrolyzed things like that. So like I said, I'll link that article for you to kind of read a little bit more about what different proteins, strengths, and all that stuff, what it does and the effects. But there's another Olaplex. I've been wanting to try Olaplex, and I may do a review on that in the near future. I'm just kind of really curious. I'm starting to see that gain some attention and some some attention and some popularity. But that may be instead of the two-step one, two-step intensive, I may use an Olaplex because I heard that has some really great effects, and I may do some reading up on what's that all about. But yeah, that's another recommendation. So on to some protein tips. All right, what do we? Like I said, look at those doggone labels. Read those ingredients. Don't just take it for face value. Don't just read it and be like, oh yeah, this is intensive, it's strengthening, it's whatever. It's gonna do exactly what it says it's gonna do. More than likely it's not, and it may not even tell you that's what it's gonna do. And you, like I said, you'll see that it has some freaking protein in it. Case in point, had no idea. So read your ingredients, okay? If anything else you take away from my videos, read your ingredients, learn what the heck those ingredients are, and then understand if your hair likes those ingredients or not. Okay, I gave you a list of different types of protein, all right? So do your research, understand what that protein's about. Does your hair like that protein? Does it not like that protein? A good way to know is if you only are using that particular product that has protein in it. So so you're trying to narrow it down, okay? So don't have multiple products with different types of protein in it, because then you're not gonna know which one your hair likes or doesn't like, or they may like all of them, who knows? But a good way to kind of be a detective to figure that out is, like I said, to just like eliminate all but one and see how your hair behaves to that. See how well your hair behaves to the intensity, how far it is on the ingredient list, the type, things like that. Once again, pay attention to how far up or down it is on the list. If it's further down at the bottom, more than likely you won't see too much of an effect, whether or not you want more protein or you're trying to avoid protein. So understand that how far it is makes a huge difference. Also, what it's paired with. If it's paired with a lot of moisturizing, conditioning type of ingredients, then it'll create a good balance. So just because it has protein in it doesn't mean that it's just strictly a protein. It's paired with some moisturizers, which brings me to my next point. You always want to create a balance between protein and moisture. So I've said this in my other videos, to prevent, the protein overload. You can pair it with, so say for instance, you do I dropped my bottle, but the keratin 2-step, and I usually do that, and I follow it with a moisturizing deep conditioner. So you can do it that way. Definitely, if you're doing something intensive, you always want to follow that with a moisturizer. Or you can find something that has both. So it creates, like I said, somewhat of a balance. All right, like I said, start small to see what protein your hair likes. And always have products that are protein free. Even though, your hair loves protein and you need it, you always want to have something that does not have protein in it, just in case you do end up with protein overload, because you're going to need to treat your hair to reverse some of the effects of that. You're going to need to use products with no protein over a specific period of time to start to see the moisture come back to your hair. Depending on how bad it is, it depends on how long you'll need to keep doing that for. Or like I said, if you're low porosity, protein sensitive, you definitely want to make sure that you have enough products on hand that do not have protein. So after I looked at all my ingredients, I had to actually do some shopping, because most of the products that I use had protein in it. But my Curlsmith double cream quencher, deep quencher, I think that's what it's called, does not have protein in it. And I was so happy because I just bought a jar. So I have my deep conditioner that does not have protein in it. Now I gotta look for a leave-in. Now I gotta look for a styler. Now my products my gels and stuff like that do not have protein in it. The EcoSlay does not have protein in it. I use Uncle Funky's Daughter gel on my hair that does not have any protein in it. So a lot of the gels that I use don't have protein in it. That's great. I'm actually excited to hear that, except for the pattern one. So this one does have protein in it. So if I use this, I got to use this in conjunction with something moisturizing, just to make sure I don't have like the matting and the knots and the things like that. So like I said, just you may have to just go shopping and buy some items that don't have protein in it, just to make sure that you have a good balance of what you're putting in your hair. All right, that is all as far as tips. hopefully this was very beneficial. If this was information you already knew, this is a great refresher for you to remember to make sure you're paying attention to what's in your hair products. My next video in my series, we're gonna go over moisturizers. I think to counteract the effects of some protein overload, we need to talk about moisturizers and also create some sort of balance. So that is going to be a very fun video, because I know we all love us some moisturized, shiny, healthy hair, okay? So I will see you next time. You guys have a beautiful week. Hopefully I'll be posting more here soon. And follow me, and hopefully, if you don't mind having another notification, go ahead and hit your notification bell so that way you can be alerted for when my next video posts. All right, guys. Bye-bye.